All right, it's 6 o'clock, so let's get started tonight. Thank you for being here. I know we've got graduation going on tonight, so I know there's a few people not with us, but thank you for coming out tonight. And if you saw the Facebook post or got the reminder, you know that we're going to be talking about this report, this investigative report that was made public on Monday. So tonight, format's going to be a little different. We're going to conclude our. All right, it's 6 o'clock, so let's get started tonight. I'm on a loop. I don't know how that happened. Graduation going on tonight. All right. Are we good? All right. I don't like hearing myself on those, so we'll conclude tonight by gathering in prayer groups and praying some, and we've kind of naturally divided already. And when we do that, in your prayer circle, if you have requests, then you can make those known in your prayer group before you pray. I will mention, though, that Eddie Davidson, he's at the emergency room right now with some difficulty breathing, and they're not sure if it's upper respiratory issues or if it's heart issues again. So, but they're waiting. They're waiting to be admitted to a room and to have some tests run and stuff. So be praying for Eddie and Luann. In addition, of course, tonight, as when we pray, we want to remember the horrific mass shooting at the school in Uvalde, Texas. So when you go to pray, please remember the families of these precious children, 19 children, 2 teachers, and that entire community. And just seems like it just keeps continuing to grow worse and worse. But Monday, as you know, a report was released by a third-party investigation on the Southern Baptist Convention's handling of sexual abuse and sexual misconduct allegations. And the time period that they were to investigate was from January 1st, 2000 until July 2021. And so this is like a 288 page document. I read through Monday afternoon. I read through kind of the highlights of the document on Monday. On Tuesday, I sat in on a Zoom meeting with Dwight Easler. You know, he pastors at Corinth, and he serves on the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention, and he shared his thoughts on the report, and we were able to ask him some questions. And then today I read carefully back through the report, and so what I'm going to try to do tonight is just to attempt to provide a concise summary. But you can Google Guidepost Solutions Sexual Abuse Report. You can Google that, and you can download the full report. And I would encourage you to do that and read it for yourself, because of course I can't give all of the details. I'm just going to give the highlights tonight. So I just want to give a summary of their findings, and then where do we go from here, because this is very devastating to the church, to the convention, and to our witness for the gospel. And then we'll have a call to prayer, and that's how we'll handle things. So we're just going to go right into it to give plenty of time to give this summary, and then plenty of time for us to pray, because we definitely need to pray tonight. So kind of a timeline of events of how this came about is over the past, I would say maybe 5 or 10 years, there's been a growing unrest among Southern Baptist members that the sexual abuse cases that were being reported were not being handled properly. And one of the reasons that the pressure continued to grow is the availability of social media. So victims and advocates for the victims took to Twitter and made known that what had happened, the steps they had taken, and how they had been responded to over the years. And so there was a growing aggravation among the messengers at these conventions that something had to be done. And there were several resolutions over the years, that were passed, and but really there was no decisive change in behavior and in handling these things. So basically last year at the Nashville, the 2021 convention, the executive committee, and when I say executive committee, I'm talking about the officers of the executive committee. So Dwight Easler, who attends a few meetings a year of the full executive committee, they were basically kept in the dark about all of these things. So when he read the report, he was just as surprised at some of these things as we were when we were reading it at the same time he was reading it. So throughout this, when I'm saying the executive committee, I'm talking about the leadership of the executive committee, not necessarily the members. So the messengers, the executive committee wanted to take control wanted to control this investigation of how things were handled, and the messengers last year would not allow that to happen. So the motion was made that a task force be established that would utilize a third-party investigation. We didn't feel like, and I voted for all of this, voted in favor of all of this. We didn't feel like the executive committee should be investigating the executive committee. That's what they were wanting to do. We said no. So a third party was to be hired to do this investigation. And later, the executive committee, they were wanting to retain attorney-client privilege, but pressure was placed upon them in order to keep them from, keep the Southern Baptist Convention from future lawsuits. But they were pressured to waive attorney-client privilege, which allowed this investigative group full access to all documentations, which was what needed to be done. Everything had to be out in the open, regardless of the consequences. So Guidepost Solutions was the organization. They are the ones that have submitted this report and of their findings. So I want to read just a couple of things actually right from the report. Their scope of their engagement was this. They were directed by the messengers of the convention to do 5 things: to investigate the allegations of abuse by executive committee members, the mishandling of abuse allegations by executive committee members, the allegations of mistreatment of sexual abuse victims by executive committee members, and patterns of intimidation of sexual abuse victims or advocates, and then 5th, resistance to sexual abuse reform initiatives. So during their process, they interviewed some 300 individuals, including executive committee members, including former presidents of the convention, former presidents of the executive committee, including victims, including family members, and they had access to over 5 terabytes of data. Now, terabyte, I'm not a technology guy, but a terabyte is a lot. So they had a ton of documents that they were able to access. A short summary, they say it this way: our investigation revealed that for many years, a few senior executive committee leaders, along with outside counsel, and all of these are named throughout the report, largely controlled the executive committee's response to the reports of abuse. They closely guarded information about abuse allegations and lawsuits which were not shared with the executive committee trustees, and they were singularly focused on avoiding liability for the Southern Baptist Convention to the exclusion of other considerations. So that was their number one priority, to do whatever they had to do to keep from being sued, the Southern Baptist Convention having lawsuits. So to keep that goal, survivors and others who reported abuse were ignored, disbelieved, or met with constant refrain that the Southern Baptist Convention could take no action due to its polity regarding church autonomy. So basically the legal line was, thank you for contacting us, but there's nothing that we can do because our churches, we don't have authority over our churches. Each church has local autonomy, so the local church is responsible for handling these things, which is true. The Southern Baptist Convention does not have authority over local churches, but the issue is that nothing was done to inform churches that they were hiring ministers who had been accused and sometimes proven of sexual misconduct in their previous churches. So even if it, and that's what they say here, even if it meant that convicted molesters continued in ministry with no notice or warning to their current church or congregation. So that's basically a summary of what they concluded. So what was also happening that was news to Dwight Easler and others was that they were told all along that they could not keep a list of names of, accused offenders due to the possibility of charges of slander and this, that, and the other. But in actuality, the two lawyers for the convention and the executive committee were actually keeping a list. For more than 10 years, they were keeping a list of ministers who had been reported as, the allegation of sexual misconduct or abuse. And in those 10 plus years, that list had 409 ministers in Southern Baptist. 400, right. So 409 ministers affiliated with the Southern Baptist. Now, each of those accusations were in large part coming from incidents that happened when the victims were children or students, teenagers, by either pastors or youth pastors or someone on staff or someone in a leadership role in the churches. So throughout the report, I forgot the name of the Guidepost Solutions. They name the key leaders of the executive committee. They name the former presidents of the SBC, and they give in detail the knowledge that they were aware of. Throughout the report, there's copies of emails and copies of letters reproduced throughout the report to prove what was said and what was known, and that the lack of taking any action, and sometimes even turning the narrative against those who were reporting the abuse. So the report also then details specific cases, and that's what, of course, I don't have time to get into. But even in these specific cases where the victims were willing to be named, they named the victim, they named the abuser, they detail the situation, and then how after continued efforts to try to bring this to awareness for the churches of the convention, that they were continually denied and continually silenced at times. So the big news here from this so far is that there was a list, it was being kept, and there were 400 names on that list of ministers, and there was absolutely no action taken whatsoever, even to just make people aware, and no follow-up on this list of names. So inevitably then putting other children and students at risk. And in some cases, it was found out that, of course, the perpetrator went on to commit another case of abuse in another church. But it was during this investigation that allegations surfaced against Johnny Hunt. So that's the other big news from this report. The list of names that were secretly kept and nothing ever done, and the Johnny Hunt allegation. And then the third thing being that how legitimate, credible, proven abuse victims were silenced and mistreated by the local church and then by the convention heads as well. So this allegation surfaced against Johnny Hunt, who served as, of course, he was pastor of First Baptist Woodstock that grew to a megachurch. He was president of the convention from 2008 to 2010. This incident occurred on July the 25th, 2010. He went on to serve until very recently as head of the North American Mission Board. So throughout this report, the pastor and his wife are not named. They're just called pastor and survivor. They were longtime friends of Johnny Hunt and his family. The pastor had been converted, come to the Lord under Johnny Hunt's ministry, and went into the ministry, and Johnny Hunt had helped him throughout the years in ministry situations. And so the investigators, interviewed the pastor and his wife. They interviewed the counselor that was on staff at the church at Woodstock, who met with this couple and Johnny Hunt, and then later met with this couple and Johnny Hunt and his wife. They interviewed that counselor who, it seems like, tried his best to say as little as possible, but the things that he did say corroborated the testimony that the pastor and his wife gave. 3 other witnesses were interviewed. All 3 of these were also pastors. 2 of those had some type of relationship with Johnny Hunt, and this pastor over the years had confided in them that something of a sexual nature, very inappropriate, had taken place, non-consensual, between Johnny Hunt and his wife. And basically, the interviewers concluded that those 6 testimonies corroborated together, and they found them to be credible. And when they interviewed Johnny Hunt on 2 occasions, that his responses to their questions proved to be non-credible. And he is up till today denying that there was any appropriate talk, any appropriate touch or contact or whatsoever with this lady. So their description of what took place is completely detailed in the report. And in the first meeting with the counselor, according to the counselor and according to the couple, Johnny Hunt confessed to partial of what the lady said took place, but now he's denying everything. So it doesn't look good at all on his part, for sure. And you can tell when you read, because there's one or two places there where his first interview doesn't match his second interview, so it doesn't look good. I don't know how familiar all of you are. I know Stephanie's very familiar with Johnny Hunt and his ministry, but I've been familiar with him ever since I've been a Christian. So unless you got a question about this, I really need to keep going. They don't say. It's just referred to as pastor and survivor throughout the whole. Yeah. All right.
I was a very close friend of Johnny Hunt. Johnny Hunt came every year for a conference. He had to leave because of something that went on and we didn't know what was going on. That was First Baptist Church out of Florida. And he actually went to Georgia and became part of that ministry down there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, all of the witnesses testify to that pastor and his wife have suffered consequences in ministry and life since that time. So, but the point really that I want to make tonight is that the example of this investigation into Pastor Hunt really serves as an example of all of these cases. The way that was handled is the way all of these things have been handled, and that's the problem. That's the big problem of mishandling and the victims being mistreated. So the repeating narrative goes something like this. A victim comes forward in a local church. The accused then is confronted and admits to the allegation. The victim is then the abuser says he's sorry. It was a slip up. It never should have happened. It won't happen again. The victim is then told, you really need to forgive, and let's forget all of this. Let's put it behind us. We don't want to continue to cause you harm. Talking to the victim. If it goes public, you're going to continue to be harmed, and the church is going to be embarrassed, and, all of the shame that this is going to bring for everybody, which is basically the same thing that, according to the counselor and the couple, that Hunt and the counselor, told the couple, if this comes out, then it's going to really hurt the 40,000 churches of the Southern Baptist Convention. So the victim is told basically to forgive, forget, let it go, move on, and keep it quiet. Don't tell anybody. And then the abuser essentially resigns for whatever reason, that he gives the church that he's resigning, and is often then, many cases, of course, if the church is unaware that anything inappropriate has happened, then they throw a celebration party for the outgoing staff member, and this person then moves on to another church where at times, of course, the abuse occurs again. So then the victim contacts, because the local church didn't handle it properly, so the victim contacts the Southern Baptist entities to request that something be done so that other people won't be harmed and other churches won't place their trust in these ministers. And the lawyers, would respond, "There's nothing that we can do. There's nothing that can be done." But there was a series of suggestions. Victims and their advocates would suggest things, even to having a conference, having training, having, a system of communication. I mean, they gave as many suggestions as they could give, and none of the suggestions were ever acted on. No action was ever really taken. Again, the main concern was if we do anything as a convention, then we're going to begin to incur lawsuits. So it was kind of, kick the can down the road to the local authorities or the local churches. So the victims suffer not only the abuse, but the shame. They're often shamed by the congregation as if it were, their fault that this happened, made to feel like it was their fault. And, of course, they've had to live with this, no justice really being done, no consequences for the abuser really happening. And they've lived with, of course, bitterness and anger and hurt and depression as a result. I know we're running out of time, so let me be quick. So where do we go from here? Well, the company has offered 8 key recommendations, so I'm fully expecting in a couple of weeks when the convention meets in Anaheim that there will be action taken on these 8 recommendations for the convention level to make changes and to incorporate action, feasible action steps, which will require a lot of relocating funds to fund all of this, but it has to be done, that would genuinely help victims of credible allegations and ensure that abusers are held accountable. And so that includes training and transparency and keeping an accessible list of offenders also. But the main thing that has to happen is, again, because of the autonomy of local churches, what has to really happen is at the level of the local church and local associations of churches. We have to stop handling these things secretly and in-house. That has to stop because that's not being handled correctly. We have to stop protecting offenders that we have on a pedestal. So a lot of abusers got away with it because they were so popular, because their churches were so large, because they had such large platforms. And we make excuses like, well, if this comes out, this is really going to hurt the cause of the gospel. Well, as it turns out, it's really going to hurt the cause of the gospel anyway to try to cover up sin. That's never a good idea. And law enforcement must be involved, period. The church local churches cannot handle these types of allegations on their own. There has to be involvement of law enforcement officials. And on the church level, so like our level, that we make sure that we're taking steps and making policies to ensure that our children and our students are always protected, and that our adult staff and our adult volunteers our policies keep us accountable and all of our actions above reproach, so that we would be free from any false allegations, and we would be free from any situations that would lend itself to an allegation. That's the thing we got to cut out. Any situation in a Sunday school classroom, in a nursery, on a trip, anywhere that would lend itself to the possibility of there being a scenario where something horrible could happen or could be accused of happening. And we can do that. For example, if I counsel someone of the opposite sex in my office, the door is open and either Missy is in her office or Martin is in his office. So I'm not here on campus by myself and with a member of the opposite sex. And when I am in counseling with them, the door is open and somebody else is here, close by on campus. So things like that, that's been my personal policy, but we've got to make sure we go across the board with everything. And I know I've taken all the time, but we got to pray. So here's just a few things to remember as we circle up and pray. Don't forget the issue in Texas. Let's pray for them tonight. We need to pray for the hundreds of victims who have been silenced and mistreated. We need to pray for repentance and accountability for all the leaders who swept these things under the rug, and all of the pastors who have been involved in these things. And that list, that 409 names, is being vetted now by a new set of lawyers, and I anticipate when they determine what's credible, what is actual, that list is going to be released. Those names will be released soon. Tomorrow. So that's coming. That's another bombshell. And all of these bombshells, again, are devastating to the witness of the Southern Baptist Convention, to the ministries, to the missionaries, to the churches, and to the individual believers. But essentially, no, it's being vetted. Well, it has, that's, the vetting process has been ongoing. Yeah. So they started doing that before Monday.
And the other question is, did the guy and those people just decide to turn loose this stuff, or did they release it with the permission of the people?
Yeah, that was their charge, to investigate and report their findings.
Not to the executives, but to the 6 o'clock neighbors.
To the public.
Okay.
Yeah, to the public. So, essentially, you know, what is done in darkness is brought to light, and God is purifying His church. We just happen to be the church that God's purifying right now. So, we need to pray for each other, pray for our leaders, and certainly pray for all of these hundreds of precious people who have been victimized throughout the years and nothing done about it. So, all right, let's go to prayer. Shane, are we having choir practice tonight?
Yes, sir.
We are. All right. So let's spend about 5 or so minutes circled up in prayer, and then pray as we go home.